Hello there guys and welcome back. Last year I sent my response to Colin on the RE4 remake, and I was going to do more videos covering the games, and now is the time to make good on that promise. Several years ago, the guy I'm covering today, Critical Nobody, made a video covering the remake of RE2, explaining what the original did better and gave his reasons why. Now to start off, I don't care whether or not anybody prefers the original or thinks it's better. This video is not a hit piece on that game, since I do think that game was also very good. But some of his arguments against the remake are either really bad, disingenuous, or him simply not understanding it, either through the gameplay or the story. I figured that I would respond both to his main video, as well as his follow-up one, responding to the criticisms he received, which is mostly just either humoring comments that aren't worth responding to, or just plain coping.
Cope!
What?
Yeah, that's right, cope!
What in tarnation does that even—
Cope, seethe, maul!
You listen here, you string bean.
Seethe,
You ain't
cope,
You're at the
everyone,
bottom
look
of
at
the
this guy
damn
over here, he's
leaderboard, you
freaking
little—
coping!
No, that—
Yeah, cope
just
a little
come
harder,
here, you
see what it—
sack-
But I will preference this opening by saying, do not harass this guy. I will be making jokes at his expense, as well as criticizing him as a critic, but that does not give you the right to attack or harass him. I say this because there's this one video that openly critiqued the remake, and the creator of the video apparently got harassed for it, to the point she didn't want the video on the internet anymore and deleted her channel. While I don't agree with that video, as well obviously, I don't endorse attacking other people for having differing takes. And while it is possible she may have been simply overreacting to criticism, I'm willing to go in good faith and believe what happened to her was genuine and that it was toxic internet behavior that I find sickening. So if I find out that anyone who watched this response follows suit with this guy, I'm going to be pretty pissed to say the least. And I will make sure those people are reported for such harassment and have their YouTube accounts being taken down.
You,
I am fucking up,
do me
Chef.
a big favour.
Yes, Chef.
Yeah? Get your apron off, get packed, and fuck off out! First, get out! Get out!
Yes, Chef.
Am I understood? Good. So let us begin and step into the world of survival horror.
No matter how much you love Capcom's survival horror series, I think we can all agree that boss fights have never been its strong suit. It has some memorable foes to be sure, but in terms of actually taking down all these big mutated baddies, these encounters are never the best parts of these games from a gameplay standpoint, and I'm honestly thinking this franchise doesn't need them to be successful. This is also the case when it comes to Resident Evil 2. Conquering the various forms of William Birkin can all be boiled down to the same simple strategy. Equip one of your powerful weapons, shoot him a few times, run away to get some distance if you need to, rinse, and repeat. There's no real variation aside from the arenas you're in, but none of them change this basic guide to success. They're not painful to play through or anything, they're just unremarkable. There is, however, one very important factor that makes these encounters easy to look past. They're quick. Like, I'm talking less than a minute quick. They're barely noticeable speed bumps that warrant at best an indifferent shrug, and therefore detract almost nothing from the rest of the game. To its credit, the remake tries to offer a bit more variation, but these new boss encounters prove to be just as unremarkable and noticeably more tedious. They can be a great visual spectacle, sure, but the mechanics of fighting Mr. Birkin are exactly the same in concept. Equip best gun, shoot, run, repeat. But now, there are some key differences. For example, this guy is an absolute bullet sponge. Actually, just about everything in the remake is, but especially this guy. He'll take round after round, grenade after grenade, and keep right on coming. Since ammo is noticeably less abundant in the remake, especially on your first couple playthroughs while you're still figuring out how to best utilize gunpowder, these fights are a resource drain, which is manageable, sure, but also feels like a waste as you're expending all your precious supplies on a single enemy. This doesn't mean the confrontations are any more challenging, mind you, they just take longer. 3 to 5 times longer, in fact, and while if you do the math, that's still not very much time in the scheme of things, I know, the point is that they feel long. There will always inevitably come a point where you think to yourself, this should be over by now, no matter how many times you do these fights.
Well, maybe it wouldn't take you so long if you actually hit the bosses at their weak points. You show yourself either missing or not even trying to hit the weak points at all. You show yourself not hitting Birkin in his gigantic eye. You hit Mr. X at his back instead of his giant pulsating heart that's exposed in his chest to get easy shots in. And in the G4 Birkin fight, you keep missing his eyes or him entirely, and you allow him to hit you instead of trying to evade him by running away. not even around the corner of the tram where you're protected from most of his attacks. In the one instance where you show yourself trying to hit his eyes, you're using the SMG, which by itself isn't the best weapon to aim for the eyes to begin with, as opposed to using handguns. But you also lack the suppressor and stock, which upgrade damage and stability. The issues here for you is bad precision, as well as a lack of exploration. You know, one of the core staples of Resident Evil. Now, I love the cope argument you make in your comment response video.
Comments about the boss fights? Bullet sponges. Did you know you have to aim for the weak points, aka the big orange glowy eyes? You weren't shooting the weak points of the bosses. Boss fights are too long and use up too much ammo. Shoots the boss all over the place instead of its weak spot. It seems that some of you missed the footage where I was clearly aiming and shooting at boss weak points. And for most of the time I wasn't, you may notice that something is missing. Yeah, the big glowy eyeball isn't there. Now, when you play a lot of games and a boss isn't showing its obvious weak point, you have one of two instincts. You either think, I need to wait for the big glowy eye to show itself, or you think, I need to do enough damage in order to make the glowy eye come back. Clearly, I went with option B, and while that may have been the incorrect choice, I don't think it was a crazy assumption for me to make.
Be silent. Keep your forward tongue behind your teeth.
Well, you just show more examples of you playing poorly. You keep shotgunning Birkin away from his eye, and you're at a decent distance away from him where the shotgun isn't as effective. As for the eyes, during the first Birkin boss, the eye is on a timer and damage threshold, meaning that either shooting to open them or just waiting are both viable strategies. So if you're low on ammo, you can simply wait for him to open the eye so you can go for the kill. And if you don't have the patience to do that, use explosives or even use Claire's grenade launcher, which can do a good number on him and even stun him. You may struggle with this the first time, yes, but after that, the boss can be very easy to manage if you know what you're doing. Plus, I also think the bosses being tougher helps reinforce the narrative that they're supposed to be these big threats that are against the odds for our protagonists, who they struggle to take down. They just feel way more intimidating, at least to me at least, than the very laughable ones in the original RE2, as well as most of the bosses in the classic games. I get that it's not an excuse for bad boss fights, but you haven't made any convincing argument as to why they're bad. Will this change for the other points against them?
No.
The one exception to the pattern mentioned above is this clash involving a crane, but the first time you do this fight, it's a frustrating bout of trial and error. The area you're doing battle in is way too small, leaving you very little room to maneuver, and without a dodge move of some kind, you're practically guaranteed to be smacked up a bit. You're supposed to knock Birkin off the platform by hitting a button that spins around a crane holding a metal container, but since it's not immediately clear where the safe zone from the container is, there's a good chance you'll end up losing a headbutting contest with it a couple times, or Birkin will decide to grab you while it's swinging around, at which point you're both getting smushed.
And his name is John C.
And naturally, when you finally do get the kill shot, you realize it takes 2 hits to knock him off, and the whole process repeats again. All told, it took me 6 tries to get through this fight my first time, and I know people that doubled that number of attempts. I can appreciate the effort to mix things up, and admittedly, I never failed this encounter again on repeat playthroughs since I have the pattern down now, but it's easily the least fun part of the entire game, and the section I always dreaded having to play again.
Wow, man, you're just DSP at this point. And considering that you kind of look like him, I'm going to refer to you from now on as DSP Jr.
Oh my god, what? That's not what happened. It showed the crate hitting him, then it cut to a cutscene of it hitting me. What the fuck? It showed the crate hitting him, then it cut to a cutscene of the crate hitting me. It literally showed, you could go back and replay it. You can see the crate hitting him. It connects with his body, and then it cuts to a cutscene of me.
As the subtitles in Eclipse say, you're in the way of the crane and the container. And it makes very clear that the control panel and behind is the safe place to be, especially with the safety lines that are around the platform. And in your response to this criticism levied against you, you say,
This has to be the biggest point people called me on. Yes, I died on the crane fight 6 times the first time I did it. I'm sure you've never stumbled on a boss fight before, right? After talking with some friends and reading comments, I know I'm not the only one who screwed up on this fight. In regards to my criticisms, I said it wasn't immediately clear where the safe zone from the metal container was, and I should have explained this differently. Yes, when you first arrive on the platform, the box is sitting there, indicating where it's going to end up. But in the time it takes for it to swing away and swing all the way back, all while you're running around on a tiny platform avoiding and/or shooting at a giant death monster trying to rip you apart, it ceases to be clear anymore. One or two metal containers directly to the face quickly fills you in again, but all of my deaths after that were from Birkin grabbing me before I could get out of the way. Call it bad luck or poor planning on my part, but that's how it went down, and like I said in the video, I never died on this fight again after my first encounter.
A very low IQ person.
You say it ceases to be clear when in the middle of fighting him, but to me, that just sounds like a skill issue. It is more than perfectly manageable to be able to avoid him as well as the crane. You say that the many of your deaths were due to him grabbing you while the crane was coming back. But once again, skill issue. You can still stun him if you want with the grenades, so that way he'll be hit by the crane. If he does recover by that time that happens, you can stun him again or at least slow him down by using the grenades, especially the flashbangs, or even using magnum shots, which is what I did here. Being grabbed by him probably means you just would have been hit anyway, honestly. It's your responsibility to make sure he's in a position to be hit while avoiding being hit yourself. I know I've said skill issue a couple of times already, but everything you have said so far comes across that way, since you've been repeatedly blaming the game for your own mistakes. I'm sorry, man, this review should be your application to IGN, because so far, this is pretty pathetic.
Even blowing up the giant alligator is less enjoyable now. It used to be quick and awesome, but someone thought slogging through waist-high human sewage would be an improvement for some reason.
I would say that is an improvement. In the original version, all you had to do was just run around a corner, drop the propane tank, and shoot it when it's in the gator's mouth. When in the remake, the sewage makes it way more tense since you can't easily just get away from the monster, meaning you can die way more easily this time around as well. I wouldn't say it's amazing now or anything, but at least there's more challenge this time around with it being more of a chase sequence where you have to maneuver and time your evasions rather than just a simple sprint, drop, and shoot. So far we've gotten past the boss section, which was really bad, and now we get to the part that's even worse. The story. Especially the characters. This is where the real BS starts.
Smell shite.
In the remake, Leon comes across as naive and gullible. Yeah, I know he's a rookie cop, but he wasn't this dense in the first game. In fact, on PS1, he took charge.
Hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm the only cop left alive in this building.
What?
Look, if you want to live, then you're gonna have to leave with me.
He just wanted to escape the city and was willing to help out anyone he stumbled upon along the way.
Look, Ada, as an officer, it's my job to look out for you. But we're not going to get through this alive if we don't work together, okay?
He wasn't trying to save the world, he was just a guy trying to do his duty and get the hell out of Dodge. Finding out about the underground lab and Umbrella's involvement was just a happy accident on the way to meeting that simple goal. Now he's a guy that, despite all he's seen up to this point, takes forever to draw his weapon on a dog that is clearly hostile until it's far too late. I love my dog. This is Akiba, he's 3.5 years old and a good boy, but if he came around the corner with missing skin growling at me with a death glare in the middle of a zombie outbreak, I'd reach for a weapon faster than Leon did. He also immediately believes Ada's claim about being an FBI agent without much pushback, blindly follows her orders, is pretty dismissive to Ben, although in fairness Ben doesn't explain himself very well either, and is tricked into getting a sample of the G-Virus with a kiss and a little flirting.
What a fucking liar, dude. What a fucking Weasley little liar, dude. What a fucking Weasley little liar, dude. Holy shit, dude.
Excuse me.
Holy
Sorry.
fucking
I'm out of
shit,
control. I
dude.
apologize for that.
Literally lying. Still lying to his audience.
I have no idea what you mean by dense in the remake, since you failed to elaborate on that. As for the Cerberus, that sounds like backseat criticism to me. Leon was trying to open the garage door so he can leave, but the Cerberus starts to sneak up on him, and he charges at Leon right when he's starting to fully draw his gun and try to get a good shot. And this is a Cerberus we're talking about, which can run pretty freaking fast. Just look at the cutscene in RE1 where one Cerberus managed to get the drop on Joseph Frost, who is an elite Star Wars member and already has his gun fully drawn already. For the point about Ada pretending to be an FBI agent, she displays a badge which looks pretty legitimate, especially at a split-second glance which is all Leon had. Plus, how would he be able to disprove that anyway? He's in a police force in a city with only 100,000 citizens. Not some massive department like New York or Chicago, which would more than likely have files or PCs which could check if Ada's telling the truth. There's no way for him to know better, still ain't even the time or place to confront her on this considering the apocalypse is happening and they just had to put down a zombie dog. As well as Ada saving his life twice when trying to break out the RPD. Plus, Leon's a rookie cop, cut him some slack. He's just making rookie mistakes, which I have laid out is reasonable to make given the circumstances. And if you want to say they shouldn't have put Leon in that circumstance to begin with, that's just limiting creative freedom for the writers. As long as the character in question stays true to what's established for them, it's fine to put them in any kind of situation. I also don't get what you mean by that he just takes orders from Ada. Never once does she order him to do anything in the game. In fact, at first she doesn't even want anything to do with Leon and tells him to get out of her way. He in fact doesn't obey, he keeps asking her what she's up to, which dismisses your claim that he isn't suspicious of her at all. And you're being entirely disingenuous about why he tries to retrieve the G-sample by taking the scene out of context. He voluntarily goes with Ada in order to bring justice to Umbrella in order to expose them for being behind the infection of the city. He's this goody two-shoes cop who wants to protect people and goes out of his way to join with Ada.
You know, it's one thing to keep the truth from me, but why him? I want to find out what's happening here and stop whoever's behind it. Helping people like them? That's why I joined the force.
My mission is to take down Umbrella's entire operation. We may not make it out.
Whatever it takes to save this city. Count me in.
That scene you mentioned is when he's heading to the lab, and Leon's concerned about leaving Ada behind, especially due to her injury from earlier in the sewers.
I thought I might need your help, and I was right. If you can secure the G-Virus, I can make sure what happened in Raccoon City never happens again.
Ada, you say it yourself. It's a federal case. I don't
Leon,
have the authority.
Look at me. I'm a liability now. If I'm gonna finish this case, you're the last hope I've got.
I'm not just gonna leave you here. What if you're attacked? What if you need help?
I'll be fine. Don't worry about me. I gotta see this through. And I want to see you again.
This just tells me that you're not being genuine with what you claim, that you overly simplify what happens, take them out of context, or just can simply read the finer details in subtext as to what and why these characters are doing the things that they do. And unfortunately, this doesn't stop here.
Claire, on the other hand, I'm mostly fine with. I honestly think both her and Leon are far too casual about the events transpiring all around them. You just think they'd have a stronger reaction to what for all they know is the end of the world.
It's good to see your face, though. How are you holding up?
I'm hanging in there.
Hell of a night, huh?
Now, all of a sudden, this is a big deal. Not only is this just as applicable, if not more so, to the original, as they also react in that context of situation kind of nonchalantly to the exact same situation, but this is also just as applicable to the other Resident Evil games as well. At least in the start of the game, during the gas station, the character you play as reacts more realistically to what's going on. Plus, in this scene that you show, you're currently in a safe place to talk just for a brief second, and they're the only other person, besides Marvin for the A scenario character, that is alive or not a zombie, so they're just trying to catch up on what they're doing and trying to have a small, brief moment of comfort. I don't see the problem when characters bantering in a brief moment of levity that doesn't undermine the scene and its tension. Especially, as I already mentioned, the other games also do this with varying degrees of success, but you don't bring that up as a problem as well. I don't want to seem as though I'm just pulling a whataboutism fallacy here, but you criticizing this scene for doing this and not the others makes it appear so you have a double standard for this game that you don't uphold the others to. Not even just the original, but just the franchise in general. Now I sure hope this doesn't end up being a phenomenon throughout the rest of this video.
But I do like how her being the sister of Decorated Stars Officer Chris is utilized for her character more. For example, her being willing to step into danger instead of fleeing from it in the intro, and having a sidearm already on her person for self-defense is a nice touch. She does curse a bit too much for my liking, not because I have a fundamental problem with the word, it's a great word, but it just feels like a forced attempt to add more grit whenever it comes out of her mouth.
My brother is stars and I. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Really, my biggest issue with her is how she reacts to the second to last fight with mutated Birkin. The first 2 times she takes him on, it's because she's ambushed and he has her cornered. She has no choice but to fight. But I audibly groaned when, after watching this horrendous monstrosity throw his wife across the room like a rag doll, take 2 direct acid rounds like it was a cool summer breeze, and sprout an additional appendage, Claire stepped forward and declared,
I got this.
No, you don't. I mean, you do because the game says so, but no, you don't. I don't care who your brother is or how many boulders he would eventually go on to punch. A 20-something university student that's only known about these creatures for like 6 hours should not be approaching this situation like a cool-headed action hero. And yes, I'd call bullshit if Leon did this too, but in his case, he's forced into the fight against his will. In the original, whenever a boss showed up, the characters reacted with silent fear and fought it because they had to, not because they actively volunteered to. Sure, in the B scenarios, they each got to say what they probably thought was a badass action line.
You lose, big guy.
But that worked because it was cheesy and lame. It was something a normal person in a crazy situation might say. Whereas here, Claire looks at this nightmare and thinks, piece of cake, I'll have this wrapped up in a GIF. I acknowledge that this bothers me to an irrational degree, and I'm sure the comments section is full of people calling me a dumbass, but it's my video and I'll rant about dumb things if I want.
For one, you literally just managed to contradict yourself in a matter of seconds. That's impressive. And the last point you criticize, the character's not acting believably or seriously enough to the situation, but then you turn around and complain that Claire cursing, even though those 2 scenes where you show that happening is when Sherry's being abducted by a predator and when her mother seemingly abandons her.
Keep that same energy.
I would consider those to be perfectly acceptable situations to curse under, especially since Claire has arguably said worse things in other games.
Oh, Alfred, you cross-dressing freak!
One might say that cursing is out of place for Resident Evil, since the original games didn't curse all that much to begin with. Not only has the series cursed more and more as time has gone on, but this game, as well as the other modern remakes, I don't think detracts from the characters or the situations by having them curse. For one, they don't curse every other word like some of the other Resident Evil media has, such as Moira in Revelations 2, the movie Welcome to Raccoon City, which has almost 100 uses of the F word, and some of the novelizations of the Paul Anderson movies, especially for the second one. I'm not saying that since they're worse, that makes the remakes better, but there is a very clear night and day difference between the amount and usage of cursing between them. Which brings me to my second point. Just about every time they do curse, it's for understandable reasons. Whether in high stress or high tension situations, such as the Claire examples I gave a minute ago, or even as banter, which was done very sparingly. So overall, I don't agree with the somewhat common criticism about swearing that I have seen that the remakes have received. As for the G3 Birkin boss, now all of a sudden you apply realism to Resident Evil, when historically speaking, it's never been realistic when it comes to the power scaling of normal, not well-trained people taking on giant freaking monsters or pulling off other impossible feats. Claire might be a college student, but there is mention in the remake itself in one of the notes Claire has from Jill, which states she's had training from Chris, the same guy who's an Elite Stars member, which took on a tyrant and won and goes on to punch giant boulders. Seems like another double standard to me. As to why Claire does this, you once again oversimplify the reasonings as to why the characters do something and what happens. For one, Birkin took way more damage from the acid rounds than what you let on. When Annette shoots him, it took him down for a pretty decent amount of time to where Claire and Annette managed to have a full-blown conversation detailing how Birkin injected himself with the G-Virus and of what's going on with Sherry. Sherry is why Claire puts herself into danger. Sherry's infected with the G-Virus and needs attention as soon as possible. So Claire volunteers herself to hold off Birkin while Annette attends to Sherry, which cures her, which is entirely in character for Claire to do, and it'll be worth it to her as long as it means that Sherry is saved. Plus, since Claire has taken on Birkin twice now and came out on top with no real injuries to speak of, unless she smoked a lot of herbs, so she has experience taking down these biohazards. As for what you say about how she wrecks the other two bosses, but not being afraid of this one, this is what we call a character arc, my friend. While she is scared of Birkin at the start of the first encounter, she noticeably gets more confident as time goes on. Just as during the second boss fight, she has some one-liners which depicts her as being more prepared and not as intimidated by Birkin despite being more evolved.
Have I got a surprise for you? Alright, time for an encore.
So when up against the third, fourth, and potentially the fifth forms, she knows what to do and is stronger for it. I would consider him to be more compelling than the characters always acting the same way with the same fearful expression every single time. Plus, that line you pull from the first RE2 is honestly way more action hero-y, and it's not something any regular person would say unless they're filming for an action movie. So basically your argument for why it's better is just because it's so bad it's good, rather than anything of substance like what I've just substantiated in the remake.
Characters. Sherry is fine, though admittedly she's more of a prop here than in the original, where she was a lot more proactive and willing to run off on her own.
How exactly? Because this is all you provide, and I promise you I didn't cut anything out. In the remake, I would say she's way more proactive in a way that makes more sense in the original, where she'll run away from Claire and Leon when they're obviously not zombies. But she goes off on her own without Claire in order to rescue her dad when she knows that there's a monster after her. Basically, her bravery fluctuates whenever the plot needs her to be without any consistent through line. When the remake is more of an arc where, like Claire's, she's also scared at the beginning to where she's basically speechless to warn Claire about the monster behind her, and when she's kidnapped by Chief Irons, she takes it upon herself and tries to escape from him herself. That's honestly less of a problem if anything, since she's more of her own character now who mirrors Claire, likely with Claire being her example. Also helps that when you escort her, you don't have to constantly start and stop running to make sure she follows you, instead of taking a fetal position whenever you're further than 2 feet away from her. Yet another example of her bravery being inconsistent.
Marvin is fleshed out a bit more, and I enjoyed the added scenes with him. Ben isn't in either game long enough to really complain much, though I do prefer his portrayal in the original, even if that head crush was pretty great. And I feel like the whole scene with the gun shop owner and his daughter was completely unnecessary, but again, he's not in either game enough to dedicate time to.
Wow man, you're just really bad at analyzing characters, aren't you? You claim the scene is pointless or unnecessary whatever, when it's not at all. For one, it provides some world building, and it adds sympathy for the people of Raccoon City who haven't been affected, by seeing the toll that the whole apocalypse takes on them. It's a great scene which allows us to feel sorry for Kiddo for having to put down his affected daughter and learning about his wife dying. That scene, and while I'm speaking for myself here, but I think others will agree with me, that this scene really caught me off guard and it kinda got to me, which is the obvious attempt that it's going for, and I argue that it succeeds. Plus, it pushes Leon and his arc where he's motivated to take down Umbrella and have him face justice, the same part I played earlier. Which, by the way, goes completely against your manufactured point that he only does it because Ada kisses him, as well as the characters not reacting strongly enough to Apocalypse, but I'm not going to reiterate those points again, but yeah, this scene isn't unnecessary.
As for Ada, while her posing as an FBI agent does make some sense as it would potentially give her access, especially in a police station, the whole gumshoe coat and glasses look she has at first doesn't sit well with me. I think the intention was to make her seem more mysterious, but to me she just comes across as more suspicious. I'm also sad that the Easter egg tie-in to RE1, where she's looking for her boyfriend John, the same John who used her name as the password for his computer, is just thrown out, because I always thought that was a neat strand connecting both titles. She also makes no attempt to hide her true intentions from Annette. In the original game, she kept her cover until blowing it was absolutely necessary, but here she actively taunts Annette and reveals information without being prompted to, which is just silly.
For one, the gumshoe look is just a trope used to depict FBI, Secret Service agents, and all forms of media, so I don't see how that is inherently more suspicious. Especially since she has convincing enough identification as I defended earlier in the Leon part. Plus, she has an in-universe reasoning to wear the jacket, which is that it's raining and it does throughout the entire night, so it makes sense from that perspective as well. And even the glasses can be explained away, at least from Leon's point of view, that she might need those for medical reasons, which is the case in real life. But even then, that is honestly just semantics at the end of the day. As for the lack of mentioning of John, I think it's fine considering how long this game was released from the RE1 remake. Despite that game had a resurgence when re-released in 2015, many people don't like playing the classic RE games due to tank controls and fixed camera perspective, which I'm totally fine playing with those, by the way. Back to the subject, there are a ton of people who haven't experienced RE1, so the RE2 remake is more self-contained since the gap between games is so large it wouldn't work as well as opposed to games released only 2 years apart at most. Plus, honestly, this might be a hot take, but I kinda think the John connection is kinda dumb, honestly, with a supposedly brilliant scientist making his password to his PC the publicly available name of his girlfriend, whose name is only 3 letters. And it's just on the nose if you ask me, and doesn't work for me because of the password I just mentioned. And I think the FBI thing works, and it just generally makes more sense overall. One could claim it takes away from the more seductive side of Ada, but since she already is like that with Leon anyway, both exploiting his good-hearted nature, and there's a part of her that actually does like him, which is still enough to communicate that side of her. Finally, for a scene between her and Annette, what are you talking about? What exactly does she admit to? Allow me to play the entire scene.
Enough with this cat and mouse game.
The game is over.
You lost. Tell me, is your husband still alive? Or did you kill him so you could take credit for G?
Interesting theory.
If you don't cooperate,
I'll get a sample from the nest.
over my dead body. Where's Leon?
None of the things she says is out of place for an FBI agent to say, and it's kind of implying for this scene that Annette already knows Ada's true intentions, and plus Leon isn't there, so there's no way he could learn about it anyway, at least from Ada's perspective. So once again, you're being disingenuous when presenting the story, which is why you are very rarely playing any actual dialogue, because if you did, it will destroy your arguments.
Speaking of Annette, she's much more cold and bitchy in the remake, being turned into one of those "I'm focused on my science and nothing else matters" stereotypes.
I'm Claire. Didn't foresee this. Excuse me. Where is she?
Where she was rightfully paranoid and quick to anger in the original, the second she hears her daughter is in trouble, she drops everything to make sure she's safe, immediately making Annette sympathetic.
Sherry's wandering around alone in the sewers. You have to help me find her.
That's impossible. I told her to go to the police station. What's she doing here? William will be after her.
But now, she doesn't seem to give a shit about Sherry until she's practically dying, and even then she quickly decides there's no hope and abandons her in less time than it takes me to order fast food at a drive-thru. As a result, you just don't care about Annette, and her redemption and death leave no impact whatsoever.
Now, media illiteracy strikes again, it seems. I've seen a couple of people pair at this point, and it just proves that some people are just incapable of reading the text. Sure, Annette may come off as cold and callous in the remake, but she has her reasons as to why. In this version, she's more rational to the point of being a detriment. William this time around is being portrayed as way more of an external threat, not just the characters, but the world at large. We see in the sewers he's been infecting the zombies, giving birth to way more G-virus monsters than just the one in the original. Annette's concerned that if he's allowed to leave the city, he can go on to affect the rest of the world, which is something she makes abundantly clear in her dialogue.
You don't understand. William is still out there, and if I don't stop him...
There's not enough time. Millions of lives are at stake. Sherry, Mommy loves you, sweetie.
Complete global saturation.
From her point of view, if she spends too long mending to Sherry, it could end up compromising the rest of the world. While she does care about Sherry and still loves her, she's essentially compromising the needs of the few, herself and Sherry, for the needs of the many, the world. She also feels guilty about not putting William down when she had the chance, which could have prevented the entire thing from happening in the first place. And the point of her character in both versions is that she's a bad mother who prioritizes either her husband and his legacy or to science in the world, such as her being compliant in the experimentation on the children in the Raccoon City orphanage. But the game does point out that she's a bad mother for leaving Sherry her house, as well as her actions under the employment of Umbrella. She's not a good person, and the game acknowledges that. But her arc is to realize the errors she has made, and she uses the last of her strength to save Sherry. How you feel about her in the death scene is up to you. To say he's executed badly just because she seemingly doesn't care about her daughter is missing the point of her character, and I think it works due to what I just described.
But in my opinion, the biggest downgrade for a character goes to Chief Irons. In the original, he's a psychopath that enjoys hurting and killing people, but he at least tries to hide it. When you first encounter him, he's sitting alone in his office with a dead body across his desk.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I thought you were another one of those zombies.
In a soft-spoken tone, he comes up with an explanation for the corpse, feigns sadness, and laments the irony of taxidermy being his hobby. No, you don't trust this guy at all, but he certainly grabs your attention, and you can at least see a certain charm to him that would allow him to reach the position of power he occupies. And when you find him again in his secret underground medieval torture room, you see him become unhinged as he raves about how Umbrella ruined his town and he'll kill everyone he can.
But I'm not letting anyone leave my town! Everyone's gonna die!
In the remake, the very first time you meet him, he smacks Claire around, threatens to kill her in front of a minor, and then kidnaps Sherry. No subtlety, no charm, just a straight-up asshole. Later on, when Sherry tries to escape him, he chases her around like Jack Nicholson from The Shining, right down to breaking through a door with an axe, and he gets acid splashed on his face because he's a symbol of good, but he's actually bad, which makes him two-faced. He's just generic evil guy now, and that's not interesting. Now this guy was interesting.
While I do agree Chief Irons in the original might be more interesting on paper, upon reevaluating him with some of my friends as research for his video, I find the execution lacking. Let me explain. During my playthrough of the original game, I was in the STARS office as Claire, and the cutscene triggers the fax machine that prints out these documents intended for her brother. It details how Irons is allegedly taking bribes from Umbrella, helping him to cover up the Spencer Mansion incident, and that he's been arrested before for, let's just say, SAing some women in the past, and that extreme caution is advised. A little while later is when I come across the Chief and the cutscene you described plays out. But for some reason, despite having the evidence I described, Claire doesn't act more suspicious regardless if you found those documents or not. And later on, they have this exchange.
Made it this far. Not bad, girl. But I'm not letting anyone leave my town. Everyone's gonna die.
Calm down, Chief. What happened?
Shut up! You couldn't possibly understand what's happened. Those monsters from Umbrella have destroyed my beautiful town. How could they do that to me after everything I've done for them?
So it's true. You have been working with Umbrella.
So this confirms that Chief has read the documents. For some reason, she apparently buys the Chief's story, even though seeing a dead body of a woman barely older than her on the desk, when Irons was pointing out how ironic it is that he used to be into taxidermy while describing how perfect her skin is.
Just look at her. She was a true beauty. Her skin nothing short of perfection. And to think that taxidermy used to be my hobby. But no longer.
And that he hasn't put a bullet into her brain yet, despite his claims that she was killed by a zombie, so she could end up just getting up attacking at any moment if what he's saying is true. This should be saying of so many red flags for Claire, but she acts no more suspicious than what she already is, despite this point only further evidence that Irons can't be trusted. So the whole guile that the Chief plays out only works because Claire's a moron in order for it to play out. She doesn't confront Chief with these papers at all, which are all papers from the U.S. Federal Police Department Internal Investigations Division, meant for her brother, an honest Special Forces officer, the most trustworthy source she could come across, and she should know that she could potentially come after her, or even Sherry, who she's trying to protect. And she almost dies to him, but convenience happens to ensure that she survives. I don't want this video to be a hit piece on original, because I do think the original is a great game, as I said in the intro, but upon reevaluating this with a friend, as I said earlier, I cannot conclude that the chief in the original is well executed. And what's funny about this is that you criticize Leon for buying Ada's story, even though it makes sense as I've already explained, but you don't seem to realize this, or just for some reason don't seem to think it's the issue at all. You're really going to have to defend your position well, and I mean really, 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 really well, in order to not come across as a hypocrite. When the Irons in the remake may not have this aspect to him, at least not in the main story, outside some of the notes where he's viewed as a hero in the eyes of the public, at least this counterpart makes more sense here, and he still has this creepy serial killer persona going on, which is as well still unnerving, as well as being more of an obstacle for the characters this summer as well. It's as the saying goes, execution is king.
Forgot how Sherry gets over her parents' death so quickly she wants to be adopted by Leon and Claire by the end. That's just plain weird. Yeah, it is. I didn't really like the ending in general. They make jokes about how Leon and Claire should get together, then a trucker drives by, flipping them off while the group makes no effort to stop him, even though I'm pretty sure he's driving toward the zombie-infested city they just escaped from. Then Sherry declares that the two should adopt her and how they should get her a dog because her mother, the same woman she witnessed die like 20 minutes ago, wouldn't let her have one. It's pretty jarring, tonally speaking, and it just doesn't really work for me. I guess add that to the list of things I think the original does better.
Let's take a look at the logistics for a minute. So we know that the sun rises in the east. Follow me on this, I'll explain. And we know that the nest is right underneath Raccoon City, and they took a train to get out of there. And we know that trains can go pretty fast, and since this is an evacuation train, it's safe to assume that it's particularly fast. We know they've been on the train for quite a few minutes. Not sure how long exactly, but we all know since all the cutscenes, as well as the boss that takes place, they're on it for at least a good while. So they're easily several miles away from the city itself, and the tunnel they left in congruence to the sun is south, and the truck is heading west. So from what I make of all this, he's not heading to the city itself, but instead he's heading past it. Everything I've examined has led me to this conclusion, and I stand by it. Plus, I'll honestly say it's just bad faith in general just to assume he's heading straight to the city to make it seem worse. Especially since we don't see where he goes, and he could be easily going somewhere else instead. They do try in order to hitchhike off of him, but he blatantly flips them off and ignores them. He also won't be able to hear him since he has music playing, and he's going pretty fast as well. All I can really say in terms of criticism at this point is that Leon could have at least tried to wave his arms at him, but that wouldn't amount to anything anyway, so that's more of a nitpick. I would say that Sherry thing is kind of an issue as well. You seem to forget that this is also applicable to the original just as easily.
So, it's finally over. Sherry, you look terrible.
No worse than you, Claire.
And so I think this brings an end to this response video. As I said, don't harass this guy. Nor is this video meant to say that the remake is totally better in every single way, because it's not. His last section, the A and B scenario system, which is objectively better than the original, so I'm not going to argue against that. But all those other arguments I've heard, both from him as well as some others against this remake, have honestly been pretty bad otherwise. And I still maintain this game is mostly a good remake. It goes on about how the Day 1 DLC, and I just simply don't care, especially since I got the game years later with all of it bundled. Plus, there's also a free alternative to paid cosmetics. Muds. But other than that, I don't really have anything to say. So, this is Skids, signing off.